Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Jackson, it's been a while.
It has been. And here
I'm noticing that 2 weeks. I'm noticing that even a 2-week break is makes me jittery. If we don't talk every week, it makes me kind of jittery because
it doesn't feel the same, does it? Yeah.
There's so much new stuff to talk about, and I had a question for you.
Okay, tell me.
Joy of Procrastination. We're now in our 36th month, so we started 3 years ago.
Wow.
36th month. So we started in July of 16. So that was when we started. So in July, we're approaching the 36th. We're in the 36th month, but when we get to the end of this quarter, 36th quarter, 36 months. No, when we get to the end of, no, I'm wrong. We're in our 12th. We're in our 12th quarter, which will take us to 36 months. Yes, and I'm good with math, but I'm weak on my concepts for applying math.
You get the idea.
So I had a question. I had a question for you. What have been the 3 biggest joys for you of looking at procrastination? If the concept we came up in a 1-hour conversation, what have been the 3 biggest joys for you?
Well, number one, the greatest joy was, let's go right back to the genesis, to the beginning, because I still remember the feeling and the look on my face when you shared the idea with me, and we were in, of course, Le Select Bistro, and you were outlining this idea with me. And I just remember there's very few occasions in your life where you hear something that just completely fits and it's completely, revolutionary, and you can't believe that you hadn't thought of it like that before. And I just remember my initial thought to you was, how long have you known about this? How long have you been holding out on me with it? And I remember you saying, no, I just thought of this. And then our conversation that led to the immediate start of the podcast, literally less than 24 hours later.
Yes, yeah, I do too. And I was reading a story, and I'm going to apply it to your first joy. And I was reading how in North Dakota and in Texas, West Texas, which are the 2 biggest oil and gas areas of the United States right now, North Dakota being number 2 to the Permian fields in West Texas, which is probably within the next 5 to 10 years will be the largest fossil fuel field in the world, because there's been a huge drop off in the big Saudi Arabian field. But I was thinking of natural gas, which for 100 years was simply burned off when it came out, because the natural gas came out before the oil shot up through the derricks, the old field of, they would see a derrick and the oil would be shooting out the top, but preceding that, natural gas had come up, and they just considered it a waste, so they burned it off. It's called flaring off. And so it was just a wasted, annoying phenomenon of hitting a oil reserve, but you had to burn off the natural gas first. And today, natural gas is considered almost as valuable, if not more valuable, than oil.
Right.
And it's actually, a lot of people don't know this, but the switchover in the United States from coal burning electric plants to natural gas burning electricity plants has actually made the U.S. two things. One is now it's the number one energy exporter in the world. From, do you remember, early in your lifetime, maybe in your teens, when the U.S. was just totally dependent upon foreign energy?
Foreign oil, 70s, the gas crisis, the oil crisis, right? I remember
the oil
my entire adult life, my entire adult or awake lifetime has been that we're always going to run out of oil. That was the thing. And now I think, this is a big month for both of us, birthday months here.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to be turning 53 and you're going to be turning 75. And that, so in that now 53 years later, there's probably, I've never heard that we're going to run out, but that it feels like
there was a concept called peak oil.
Yeah, right.
Peak oil. And it actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but this was actually the birth of the environmental movement. The green movement actually was triggered by the notion that we're going to run out of oil. And then about halfway through the 53 years that you're talking about, all of a sudden, a bunch of real entrepreneurial pioneers came across the idea that one is that natural gas is incredibly valuable, and that you can actually get it out of rock, and the whole fracking notion that you could get both natural gas and oil out of rock with very advanced microtechnology and other kinds of technology. And so, and it's really, really interesting because if the complaint against oil is that it's dirty, natural gas is very clean. And so you've brought across an entirely new technology. But the point I'd like to go back to is the burning off of this resource for more than 100 years. And still some places in the world, the big oil fields, they still burn off the natural gas because they don't have the means to actually capture it and actually turn it into electricity.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: it's wasted, it's bothersome, it's a negative that got turned into a positive. And the article that I was reading that reminded me of procrastination is that in the oil fields in North Dakota now, they're capturing the natural gas at source and using it to generate electricity right in the field. So all the energy needs for the oil fields themselves, electricity, is now being supplied by what used to be a total waste. And they've now taken this resource and actually turned it into electricity. And so they're electrifying all the oil fields. Everything that's needed to actually operate the oil fields is now being driven by what used to be a waste product of the oil fields. And that seems to me to be analogous to what you and I have been doing for 3 years with procrastination. We've been, instead of flaring off and wasting the time and the effort and the thinking and the emotions that were tied up with procrastination as a negative thing, what we're now doing is we're using it as a source of fuel. We're now using it as an energizer to actually identify the who's that we need to actually achieve our goals instead of us doing the hows. We're trying to do the hows because we weren't really doing the hows. We were we were stuck and paralyzed. So that's I just think this concept, and it just shows you how concepts can be a source of energy.
And that was the thing is, it's worth almost 36 months into it now, 12 quarters into it, and routinely asking, okay, procrastination, what have you got for me today? Has been, and that is a well that never runs dry. It's just evergreen. I've got a constant, right at the top of my mind. right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's always right
mm-hmm.
there. It's bubbling, gushing to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
you never have to mine.
So talk about that, because I think we're on to a second joy. We're on to a second joy, it seems to me.
Well, yes. So that
first of all, there's just the recognition, the recognition of the possibility.
Yes, the recognition, and that was the concept that you shared. That was the joy, that really realizing that this is the thing, that it's like this always on thing that points us in the right direction. And that awareness really was the fuel that kind of, led and put kind of direction to this thought of who, not how, because that's something that, when you think about that, why, in the exploration of why we procrastinate, or why that happens, is often because it's something like my initial, kind of discovery was by changing my verb, meaning the thing that, addressing something as the big thing rather than the action that needs to be taken, and softening my verb into the power verbs for me, which are brainstorming and talking. Talking is the big thing now.
Yes.
And that's been something that came out of this, that you really realize that is the killer move. That's the one that both of us have evolved to a point now where it's almost exclusively what we do. And so given that permission, or that sort of shift now to really surround everything with having who's that can take that output of what we're talking and turn it into all the things that we need it to be. And that's the thing, whether the talking is really true about whether it's giving directives or creating content like we're doing right now, getting our ideas into a digital form.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about this is I look at the world, that treats procrastination as a negative thing. It's a silent world. There's no talking. There's no talking in the negative procrastination world. Right.
That's true, because it's kind of like this thing that everybody's hoping that nobody finds out that they do this. Everybody sets up all these. Yeah, it's a secret, and everybody sets up things to cover their tracks to make it seem like shameful. They don't procrastinate.
It's a shameful. Yeah. It's a shameful thing. So the last thing that people will openly talk about, or even bring up the subject, is that they're a procrastinator.
Yes. Nobody wants that to be known about them. So they go to great lengths to set up workarounds and set up things that, padding deadlines and giving themselves time to get something done, and to be able to show the appearance of things happening and moving towards to the finish.
Or complaining and blaming.
Yeah. Yes.
Where you're shifting the topic, you're sort of, I don't want any attention to be on me, so I'm going to shift that there's something wrong with the situation. There's something wrong with the circumstances.
Yeah, I really need this to get this done.
Yeah.
Shifting it externally.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, but I'll tell you a particular joy I have, and see if this, since your 53rd birthday is on the horizon here, my 75th, and one of the questions that has come up to me when do you think you'll run out of ideas?
Well, let's see.
Like I'm 75, and I'm looking at the next 25 years now as a workable structure and framework for me. So that would take me from 75 to 100. And I said, now, is there any chance that I would run out of ideas? And I said, I'm only safe my future is safe within procrastination. Okay, so what I'm looking is that I've got like a creativity life insurance policy for the next 25 years. And all I have to do is come up with goals, part of which I don't know how to get there, and which means that my goals, my ambitions for something bigger and better actually confronts me with a how that I can't do. And now if I was part of the global silent community, then I would stop. I would have to stop, at 75. Well, I can't go any further because I'm just running into a house now that I just can't pull off. But since we have a trick and we're saying, well, that just means you have to go out and find some even bigger and better who's than you've ever discovered before, and simply explain to them what it is that you're trying to achieve. And off to the races you go, and it's exciting, and it's fascinating. I would relate this back to another conversation we had quite a bit of time ago, beyond 3 years. It was one evening I was simply asking you the question of what would fascinate and motivate you for the rest of your life. And I just wonder if you would actually connect the conversation we had there, because that was a big one for you. I remember
it really was.
You're big. So how do you connect that to the joy of procrastination? So if you can put those two concepts together, how would you see that playing out?
You know how when you've gone down a path and you can now look back to the to the thought and realize how perfect that path is, because that was almost exactly now, very beginning of May, 7 years ago now, when we had the conversation, because I remember that the very first Breakthrough Blueprint event that I did was in June of 7 years ago now. And I just remember, booking the hotel, for the 6 weeks from when we had the conversation, literally the morning after having the conversation. And when we were, this was the first time that I had heard you use that particular articulation of unique ability in a way, right? Like when you were saying that it's really internally about what's going to fascinate and motivate you, I looked that, and without, I look at it now, how the Breakthrough Blueprint kicks off so many boxes that are right in my go zone. For one thing, it's based around one thing. And that one thing is the framework, the Breakthrough Blueprint framework with the 8 profit activators. So that is the fixed framework that is the overriding thing. Then you bring in the variables, which variety is my favorite thing as a quick start and as a ADD and all of it, that I like to have new inputs. And so having 12 people, new people every time is the event is never the same twice. So I'm getting to use my quick start abilities to line up and challenge my knowledge of and all the stored up experiences of how the 8 profit activators apply to all businesses, right? I've had so many so many experiences
hundreds,
of that now.
Hundreds, right?
Yeah. And I look at that as an asset that is, it makes each new layer of information and experience and testing and results has layered on top of it that it becomes more and more valuable, like machine learning. The more and more I do it, the more and more inputs I have, the more and more experiences I have with it. I get to see how all that vast experience applies to anybody in any situation. And we've been able to take things that we've developed for a financial advisor role and apply that to a dance studio, or apply that to or take something that we learned with a dance studio and apply it to a law firm that helps people with a very specific import-export tariff visa. And so it's just so funny how it fits right into my procrastination-proof sort of way of doing it. It's literally talking. I'm the who for that particular part of it, but all I have to do is be there for the 3 days. So it fits in my world, and that makes up about 270 of the 415 hours that are required to maintain my base business. But it's stuff that only I can do. It's the highest value things that I do.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, because I have a process too, that I started back in the 80s, which is VODA. Really, it's the strategy circle, but it's really VODA, and it's vision, opposition, and then you transform the obstacle into action, and the action creates it. And I think that probably, if you ask me how long I've been thinking about procrastination before I shared it with you, the actual connection didn't happen until about 2 days before we had our conversation. But I've been dealing with this formula for allowing the opposition to come up, and one of the things that I bypassed back in the 80s was the notion of the positive thinking community, saying never think in terms of the negatives, just think about the positives. And so there was a discouragement on the part of people who prided themselves on being positive. They wouldn't allow any negative thoughts to come into their mind. And it kind of struck me that they were doing a kind of a lobotomy on themselves by doing that, because it's actually our brain engaging with the negatives that actually makes us creative. Yeah. And so I've been doing that. So you say, so this is 2016. So for 34 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for 34 years, I had been treating obstacles as a positive. In other words, I had been saying that all those things which seem to oppose our goals are actually the raw material for achieving our goals. But I didn't have the procrastination linchpin. I didn't have that until a couple of days before we actually had our conversation, Genesis conversation. We'll call it the Genesis conversation. So in some ways, I'd been thinking about it for a long time, but I hadn't seen the connection that we talked about. And, and I've always said, well, you don't know anything until you know the obstacles. That really all the money is in the obstacles. And I've been thinking about that a lot. So can we say that your total confidence now about the 8 profit, the 8 profit activators is?
Did you hear that?
What was that?
Did you hear that was the loudest lightning thunder strike that I've ever heard
In Orlando?
I think it may
or
have
lifetime.
it may have
lifetime.
blown a
Generator
transformer or something. Maybe that's why. But anyway, that was
the lights
scary.
go out.
Did the lights go out? I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Good so far.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yeah. There's an energy source, but however, we don't really have the capability of actually capturing those things. Yeah. Yeah. And anyway, so it's really, really interesting, because going back to the question, are you ever going to run out of ideas? I have the same sort of assurance that you do.
Right.
That just because of the way my mind works, I'm always thinking of something bigger and better in a particular area of business and my personal life. And the moment I think of that bigger and better thing, I put measurements to it and I put a deadline to it, then immediately I'm confronted with the obstacles. And as long as I take the who, not how approach, there's no end of the growth, and there's no end of the fascination and motivation.
Yes. And I think that the thing that I'm learning about this is that it's really the only thing slowing us down is the ability to rally the who's in a fascinative way, to keep up with the what's that we can identify. And that's really the fun. That's really the fun thing. Is that's where the creativity is, envisioning the what you really want to have happen. And of course, you've had so much training with that in spending 25 years every day saying, "What do I want?"
Yeah,
and that's a big skill, I think. That I would find. And I think that the people who have the biggest achievements or the biggest accomplishments are really the people who can not limit themselves in the size or the scope of the what's that they can imagine.
Yeah. And I've noticed that. I'll talk to people and I'll say, they seem to be up against some sort of limitation. And being in a coaching role with them, I'll say, so, what do you really want here? What's it really look like? And I notice that there's a lot of interference in their thinking coming from somewhere. I don't know where it's coming from, but they say, well, I don't know. And it's kind of funny. There's this question that I've noticed is that if you did know, what would it look like? And they can answer that question. They can answer that question immediately.
Right.
And And so it means that in some part of their brain, there's actually an answer to the question, but there's all sorts of static that's getting in the way of them identifying that thing. It's like the bother exercise over the past quarter. You say, well, this really bothers you, but if it didn't bother you, what would be the fast solution to this? And immediately they have the solution.
Yes. Yeah, I think I mentioned to you that's one of the things, like, for years, and I've brought it back now, is I would always ask, what would make my life better? And then I would ask the things of what am I tolerating? Like, what are the things that bother me? And that's a good way when you can identify them and you can have a magic wand. I almost think about, I had a yellow page, yellow legal pad, that I would imagine if I could just write it on this yellow pad, that it could disappear or be made real, And that's really what it comes down to, is our ability to to articulate what we want or what's bothering us and what we want instead, or how we want that to look, and then know that that can be taken care of. Which reminded me then of your, and I'd love to hear you talk more about actually this idea of what you've the first time I heard you say it was a game changer with total cash confidence.
Yes.
And there may be something to that. Maybe talk a little more about that.
Yeah, well, in the Game Changer program, which is a little bit more than a year old in the coach program, it's where you are at a point in your entrepreneurial career where you definitely have unique capabilities that are not only making life good for you, in other words, you're able to have the lifestyle that you want, you have, all the teamwork that you possibly want right at this moment inside your company, so that your role, if I use your number, you have so much teamwork in your life that your entire lifestyle can be paid for with slightly more than 400 hours of concentrated achievement every year. And that's total cash confidence. That tells me that you have total cash confidence. So then you say, okay, what if I were to play a 100 times game? I'm going to say that my capabilities right now are 10 times. And I certainly, in comparing myself to who I used to be, I'm 225 times since the start of the strategic coach program. And, and I'm working far, far less, but I'm the whole teamwork aspect of strategic coach with all of our team members and our other coaches and, sales and marketing and, everything it takes to run a company. That's vastly bigger than it was when it was just more or less myself and Babs. And so I can undertake projects out in the world with other entrepreneurs who have unique capabilities where money is not my main concern, that this is going to produce money right off the bat, because if I needed the money, then I couldn't play the game. I'd have to be concerned, where's the money going to come from? But the further I can move money down the line, it's going to be there and it's going to be really big. But I can explore other things like acquiring new capabilities, exploring how collaboration works. I can create new types of concepts out of this. It's such a uniquely creative activity that I can create entirely new kinds of concepts. My credibility goes up because I'm combining my capability with someone else. For yourself, for example, on the Joy of Procrastination. If we had to get money out of the Joy of Procrastination, that would take all the joy out of it.
That's true. I mean, the part of the thing,
and we'd probably procrastinate. It would throw us back into procrastination and say, it would just gum up the works, really.
Right.
But, we the two of us, I can tell, have a commitment that this is just an enjoyable activity that we're going to do for the rest of our life. And what's interesting is great concepts come out of our conversation, which actually produce all sorts of new money-making possibilities.
Yes.
But we're not concerned with it because we know how to handle the money. And we're totally confident that the cash flow is going to come out of what we've already mastered.
Yes, that's true, and it does, and that's part of that. Sometimes in those kind of things, like the reward comes even just from doing the thing. Like this collaboration has been, one of the great joys of the last 3 years here. It is really. When we're in the middle of these conversations, it really is. It feels very selfish that we're just having this conversation. I'm not really even we're not paying attention to the fact that this is something somebody else is listening in on consciously.
Yeah.
It's like the value of it is that we're having this is so helpful to us that it's just a nice serendipitous benefit that other people get to listen in.
Well, the interesting thing is, because I think that whoever is listening into this knows that we're just more or less doing this for fun.
Right.
I mean, we're doing it for serious fun.
Right.
Because we're seriously interested in the ideas that will unpredictably emerge from the conversation.
Yes.
But other people find that very enjoyable. I know I have, a number of fans who always make it a point, the next workshop that they're at with me, they make a point of saying, "Oh, that one you did then, oh, that idea, that's really, really interesting." But think about what we're doing, because we're already cash confident in another part of our life. This is an activity. It's not free time activity. It's actually, it would fall into really exquisitely focused a type of activity.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a focus activity, but the fact that we've moved any possible money that might come out of this way to the end of the line, but we're focusing on other rewards. So content, credibility, and I think the other thing is connections. In other words, that we'll each talk about connections we've made as a result of the thinking that we're doing here. And that there's kind of a community. There's a Joy of Procrastination community that's formed out of this, and then we both have a lot of confidence. And the interesting thing is that there's all sorts of money-making activities that are presenting themselves to me quarter by quarter as I go along. Now, not all of them really interest me right now, but they do interest me that they're starting to emerge as a possibility. And I can sit there and say, well, that might be interesting, and everything like that. But I know that they've been created out of the very activity that we're doing.
Yes. That's so great. I love that. That's kind of the thing. And when you really think about it, I say to people often, if you've got, like you're talking about the audience of people, because I have the same thing. People will always say, they listen to us, or people email me with something that we said on the thing, or they'll email a link that would support something that we were saying, which I'll pass on to you. And when you start to think about just the activity of this as pure, procrastination proof sort of thing that we know when we're going to do it. It's got we've got the time locked in. That's what we kind of know exactly when it's going to happen, and we don't really have to give it any amount of thought or preparation. There's nothing to procrastinate. It's just show up on the phone and start talking. And that's really what, for both of us, is the thing that makes it effortless,
Yeah. So I've come up with an idea that I'm developing into September's book. So I have a book coming back in June that's now at the printer called "Who Do You Want to Be a Hero To?" And that got generated out of the Game Changer. And then this new concept, which is called Free Zone Frontier, which popped out in the last quarter of Game Changer. And I'm using America, the moving of the frontier in America, which the anniversary of which is next year. To be from 1620 to 1890, that there was a moving frontier in the United States, which at a certain point reached the coast of the Pacific. And so that was for the lower 48 states, that was the actual frontier experience, the geographic frontier experience. And my sense is that the U.S. as a country in 1890 then went into a huge systems creation period of history, which lasted about 80 years up until the 1970s. And I was thinking about this yesterday because I'm mentioning this in the book. And from around 1890 to 1970, the U.S. created the interstate highway system. So the complete highway system in the United States from coast to coast was established. The electrification system, the movement of electricity across the country, the telephone, national telephone system, national radio system, national television system, and it's a free trade system. So they worked out all the interstate commerce and everything. So it was a massive, it was almost like, and then there was the national air system, airplane system. And all that happened during that 80-year period. And it required fairly large bureaucratic organizations to pull that off, government and corporate bureaucracies to pull that off. So you had about 4 generations of Americans who they weren't out there on their own because there was this huge system building, and then there was the military system because there were major wars, global wars during that time. 2 of them which were active wars, and then a third one which was a standoff war with the Soviet Union. And then all of a sudden, with the introduction of the microchip, all of a sudden the entrepreneurial period took off again. And this is where you can create free zone frontiers on an individual basis. I mean, you think about the great microchip heroes, that we've known over the last 50 years, 60 years, and the things that are being done with the digital. And think of what you were able to do digitally with creating competition-free zones for
for the real estate,
residential real estate. That you created a free zone frontier for as many real estate salesperson that who wished it. I mean, they didn't have to take advantage of it, but if they wanted it, they could have a free zone frontier with existing real estate just by conceptually overlaying a concept of how they could spend their entire real estate life inside of a single neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now you think that I was just thinking that same thing now fits even in Cloudlandia. Now we've got the whole that's the whole frontier. But I don't want to get you off track. Go ahead.
No, but I'm just saying that you have to have cash flow confidence to actually sit back and look at digital possibilities. For example, I've talked to you about the deal that I have with Ben Hardy, the writer, who now wants to take my small books and make them into big national, globally published big books. Okay, so the first one that happens, he kicks off in June, and then that book will be ready by the end of 2019, and or 2020, so it'll be about 16 months start to finish, and that's a normal publisher sort of thing. But the way I did it, I simply said, well, Ben, just to make this a really good collaboration, we'll take as our reward the benefit of your capabilities, and we'll take as our reward the actual having this book out. And we're shooting for 1 million, big book. So that's very definitely a New York Times bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller. And I said, and people will read this book and they'll get excited and they'll inquire about joining the Strategic Coach program. And so my reward is when reading the book that we write together, they'll sign up for a Strategic Coach program. But meanwhile, all the money related to the book itself, well, that'll be your money. And if I wasn't cash confident, I could never even entertain such a thought.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing where that's a big shift when you move into that kind of collaborative role,
Yeah.
versus being a vendor, like you said, right?
And I tell people, they said, well, why are you letting him have all the money? And I said, what money?
Right.
Yeah. What money? What money are we talking? Well, the money he's going to make from writing the book. And I said, well, there was no money unless I had a writer to write the book.
Right.
I said, I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a publisher. And now he's linking up with, he's linking up with all sorts of geniuses, and how you promote books like this, and how you take bulk sales and make, like, if you sell bulk 200, you can make each one of them actually be a individual purchase, which really counts in the in how many books you've actually sold. And all that knowledge, all the who's that are doing that, that's coming out of Ben's budget.
And that's not anything that you wouldn't even know how to do that.
Well, I wouldn't even know who to talk to.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know who to talk to, and I wouldn't even know I wouldn't even comprehend what can be done. Right. But that's all come because I think that was a great question you asked me about total cash confidence, because that's the whole thing. Like, and somebody said, well, what if he makes $10 million? I said, well, it'll make him more committed.
Right, exactly. Yes. I think that's absolutely true, right? And that's the kind of thing where you're creating opportunities out of nothing, out of something that was
free.
Yes.
Yeah. In other words, if I'm not concerned about the money, then all these capabilities are actually free.
Right. And that if whatever's happening there, if it's that big of a success that he's going to make $10 million, the outcome of that for the reach and the what's going to happen for Strategic Coach is phenomenal. You weren't doing anything else. It was all just him doing. He was the who that made that happen.
And I didn't require any how except the how that I've already demonstrated. Right. And that how I actually enjoy doing, like creating the little quarterly books. I actually enjoy that. And even there, I started off with the first one thinking I would have to do it all myself, and now I've got a team of 10 other people who reduce my hours per book down to 35 hours per book. So. Yes. In the past, I've written books where it's 400 or 500 hours over about 2 years, and now it's 35 hours per quarter.
Yes. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're really onto the threshold of an entirely new entrepreneurial world here, Dean. Personally, I think, if you talk about the definition of entrepreneurism as someone who takes resources from a lower level of productivity to a higher level of productivity. Yeah. And my feeling is that what prevents taking resources from low to high is actually your need for immediate cash flow.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I mean, it really is. I'm just, my mind right now, I'm in a bit of a trance because my mind is just so trying to calculate the scope of what we have as an opportunity here in this free zone frontier. When you start thinking about just your rundown of what's happened in the last, 80-year period here. Yeah. And when 80 years, when you were going down the thing of, all of this stuff, the auto industry, highways, electricity, radio, TV, airports, all of this stuff that has literally been in the last 100 years or so.
Yes.
And now we're at this opportunity where with Cloudlandia, I just feel like Cloudlandia is the ultimate free zone frontier that we're faced with here, that we have. And with your citizenship in Cloudlandia comes a radio station, which we are broadcasting on the Cloudlandia radio network globally with our podcast that costs us very little money. I mean, when you really think about the small cost of the tools and the bandwidth or whatever we require to get this out to the world, but essentially we have access to it through these phones. And the same thing with we have a TV station where you could broadcast the same thing. We have access to, we have our own post office where we can, connect with every single individual for free. I mean, it's really like, it's just ridiculous when you think about this. And as that's growing now with the, what are we up to billions wise now? Or 7 billion people on the planet? 5 billion of them?
7.8, 7.8, I think, yeah.
Well, what are we at with the online world?
I kind of check every 6 months or so because, it's going up, but they're...
but we're approaching 5 billion online? Or what it was
somewhere. I think it's one way or another. They're kind of... I mean, the whole thing is that they're now closing in on a major project, and that is that there's still 1 billion without electricity, which is going to be, another huge jump, because it's what keeps people in poverty is their lack of connectedness, and they don't have the power to be connected, and they get manipulated badly when they're. Almost everything bad that can happen to human beings happens when they're not connected. Okay, because bad things can happen and no one even knows about it. There's no way of communicating with each other in order to organize with just letting the world know what's actually happening. And so it's a really fascinating world, and we're kind of. When I think of 1944, when I was born, what was possible then? Well, you were still inside the big systems creation process, to be an entrepreneur and try to make your mark as an individual entrepreneur. For the first 30 years of my life, and even till the personal computer. I think it was really 1978 or 79 when the first personal computer. That's the first real crossover moment for individuals. It's when you have, there were computers, but they were very, very expensive, and they were very limited what an individual could do with them or even have access to them. And if you look at all the the early pioneers, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs being probably the crossover heroes, because they're the ones who made it possible for billions of individuals to have access to their own computers. That's late 70s, and so that's really the threshold. That's when I think that the entrepreneurial, going back to the free space where single individuals are now creating the free zone frontiers again. I think that really is back then. But it's an interesting thing of I'm going to actually introduce Free Zone Frontier into the 10 Times workshop next, just to show people that they actually are taking advantage of a lot of free zone frontiers that they don't even know about. Right.
I think this is really. I think
one of them is. Being more ambitious from 75 to 100 than I was at any time up to 75. That's a free zone frontier.
Right, exactly. And, I think that we're moving into, as I think about it, this is going to be, I think, the era of whoing versus doing. I mean, we're definitely whoing is the power skill. And if it's like ideas, the what's that's the only limitation. Thinking, is creating better ideas.
Well, having bigger, I think it's driven by your own personal goals. You want bigger and better as a capability. And that's what drives the using the procrastination, the automatic pop-up of procrastination, and then saying, oh, well, this kind of bothers me. And if it didn't bother me, how does it get handled? And who handles it instead of me? And so it's almost like a generator we've created here. It's an automatic, and the raw material that goes in as the fuel is the automatic procrastination that's triggered by bigger and better goals.
I'm just thinking now, Dan, that there's almost like a skill of, like, when we were in the computer age, like getting everything up to where all the problems were solved, all the capabilities were built out with personal computing and internet programming and that kind of thing. I think there might be now is the opportunity for whogramming. Whogramming, what do we call it? Where that's really, I think that's the new skill, where you can treat, where if you're treating this connectivity to who capabilities online as a circuitry in a way, and you can program, whogram the algorithm that makes it all happen. That, I think, is the power skill.
I mean, it's all triggered by wanting what you want. Being not wanting what you need, but I think wanting what you need was the economy up until a short time ago. Okay, in other words, going back a couple 100,000 years, humans wanted what they needed, and that got them from one day to the next at the most minimum. But now we've crossed over into an entirely different world where it's not wanting what you need, because I live in Toronto, you live in Orlando. I mean, you're smart enough to have more than enough cash flow. So as far as needs go, that's pretty well handled. Now the big question is, are you wanting what you want? And I've got a whole thesis that I've been following, because I'm interested in this socialism thing that's going on as a topic. This wouldn't have even been brought up in private 40, 50 years ago, because the great enemy was the Soviet Union, which was socialism. Communism, which is, it's socialism plus armed people showing up in the middle of the night and taking you away, and so America was the counterpoint to that. But I'm really, really interested now that we're passing from a world of wanting what you need, you're actually into wanting what you want, and the words socialism. So I've been playing around with this for the last 3 months. I said, what's actually going on here with people actually? Because, the people who are most espousing socialism are actually really, really good at capitalism.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's a bit of not wanting competition. I always suspect that when people go socialistic, it's because they've got theirs and they want to make it difficult now for anyone else to actually get theirs. So let's regulate and limit and tax and everything else, but not us. So anyway, it's an interesting thing, but I think we're this crossover from the world of wanting what you need to wanting what you want. I think it's a threshold moment psychologically, intellectually, entrepreneurially.
If only there was a book that shared how to want what you want.
Yeah.
That would be great.
I think it'd be useful. I think it would be useful.
Would be. Wherever books are sold, available now.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fast hour.
It really has, Dan. It's never long enough. Yes. Well, are we on for next week?
I'm in London. I'm flying to London.
You're in London next week. Okay, so then when you're
in
back.
London.
Well, you're going for 2 weeks.
Going to have to stock up on ideas during this 2 week period. Yeah, I've got my 75th birthday actually happens when I'm in London. That's 2 weeks from today, actually. And but I'm all primed, I mean, I'm looking. But this has been very helpful for me to get a handle on what's happened over the last 3 years with our with our wonderful vehicle here.
I love it. Well, if I don't talk to you, happy birthday.
You bet. And when's yours? Yours the end of June.
Mine is May.
May, right?
No, mine's May 10th.
May 10th. May 10th.
I'll be before you.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. We're cosmic twins almost.
That's exactly right. Yes. Okay, Dan.
Okay.
We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.